People are often urged to be honest and open, to allow others to see their true selves. However, what is left unsaid is that the more people are aware of an individual's inner life, the easier it becomes for them to control and influence that person. The world around us does not encourage absolute candor. On the contrary, it actively exploits it. Words spoken can later be used as irrefutable evidence, and personal experiences and emotions are meticulously recorded, transforming into potential tools of leverage. Often, people merely feign care and sympathy, while in reality, they are diligently gathering information that can be used against you. The great thinker Machiavelli never advocated for total honesty with everyone without exception. His teachings emphasized the need to be astute, act strategically, and, when necessary, be ruthless. In modern society, where demonstrating openness is sometimes perceived as a valuable currency, the wisest and most effective step for an individual is to reliably protect their inner space, transforming it into an impregnable fortress. Everything a person chooses to share with others inevitably transforms into a tool in someone else's hands. At the same time, the information they carefully guard becomes their own powerful weapon. The 5 specific secrets to be discussed are not a random collection. They represent nothing less than a person's psychological armor. It is crucial to keep them in the strictest confidence, for otherwise, the consequences could be dire. What remains unknown to others cannot be controlled or influenced by them. The first and most crucial principle states, one should never reveal the full extent to which they are willing to go in their actions or reactions. Others show a persistent interest in a person's boundaries not out of respect for them, but out of a desire to find out how far they can push before the individual reaches their breaking point. As soon as an individual clearly defines their limits, they essentially hand over a detailed blueprint of their operating system, revealing vulnerabilities. For example, when a person declares, "I will never end a relationship with anyone," others begin to gradually deplete their internal resources, test their patience, and freely cross established lines, confident in their inability to decisively leave. Similarly, uttering the phrase, "I will never seek revenge no matter what," instantly turns an individual into an easy and convenient target. Opponents' actions in such cases are dictated not by true courage, but by arrogance, as they are already aware of the person's unwillingness to resist. Such behavior is not a display of nobility, but rather complete self-exposure. And in a world where strategic thinking prevails, such exposure is tantamount to voluntary self-destruction. It's important to understand that people rarely fear kindness. Their true apprehension is caused by unpredictability, by being unreadable. They fear someone who maintains an outward smile but leaves the possible consequences of their actions to the imagination of others. It is this uncertainty that sows confusion among opponents and keeps them in a state of constant vigilance, preventing them from acting freely. However, when an individual clearly defines their breaking point, they thereby provide others with precise guidelines for systematically undermining their self-esteem. Such an action significantly simplifies the work of those who seek to harm. Consequently, personal boundaries cease to serve as protection. Instead, they begin to indicate the path for those who wish to violate them. Therefore, a person should stop endlessly explaining their intentions, what they will or will not do. They should not burden themselves with caveats or excessive clarifications. Let their silence be a formidable harbinger of possible consequences, a mute but weighty warning. Let their unpredictability serve as a comprehensive answer to any challenges or questions. They do not need to openly threaten anyone, nor do they need to elaborate on what exactly will happen if others dare to cross an invisible line. Such actions are merely a display of deep emotional vulnerability, mistakenly perceived as effective communication. True strength manifests when others begin to carefully consider their actions before showing disrespect to a person. This happens not because they have ever caused public scandals or displayed outbursts of anger, but because others have no idea what they are truly capable of. It is this type of fear that prompts people to be extremely cautious and circumspect. It is not an all-consuming terror, but rather a deep, pervasive sense of uncertainty that compels them to keep their actions within the bounds of propriety. They act this way not out of genuine respect, but out of fear of making a reckless move. For the fear of unseen, unpredictable consequences is far more potent and paralyzing than 1,000 angry tirades or open threats. It is no coincidence that the great thinker Machiavelli once stated, "A lion cannot protect himself from traps, and a fox cannot protect himself from wolves. One must therefore be a fox to recognize traps, and a lion to frighten wolves." A person must embody both these aspects, skillfully balancing cunning and strength. Outwardly, they should not appear dangerous or threatening. On the contrary, they present themselves to others as a thoughtful, composed, and judicious individual. However, deep within their being lurks a silent predator who tirelessly calculates and analyzes the situation. No one can predict precisely when this inner predator will decide to act, or how far it is willing to go in its actions. It is in this manner that a person can dominate without raising their voice or overtly displaying power. They do not vent their anger, but keep it under strict control, skillfully directing internal energy. They do not announce their methods and strategies, but only apply them at moments when it is truly necessary and crucial. They should never reveal to anyone how far they are willing to go in their actions, because the truth is that even they themselves do not fully realize their limits. And it is this internal uncertainty and unpredictability that makes them truly dangerous to those who dare to challenge them. Let their outward calm become the very storm for which their opponents were utterly unprepared. Let their veil of secrecy serve as a warning that will sound far louder and more convincing than any open threat. For in this world, those who openly declare their boundaries and limits often become their own hostages and victims, while those who know how to maintain deep silence become living legends of unpredictable and devastating consequences. The second important principle states, never reveal who influences or inspires you. There is a well-founded reason why others often ask about who inspires one's actions or shapes their worldview. At first glance, this might seem like innocent curiosity, but in reality, it is far from it. Such questions are a strategic probe, aiming to discover which ideas and individuals shape a person's thinking. Once others know who they genuinely admire, they will immediately begin to study these sources, attempt to imitate them, or, far more dangerously, use this information for their own manipulative purposes. When certain forces are aware of the type of thinking that shapes a person's worldview, they gain the ability to skillfully push interpretations of ideas that are advantageous to them. In this way, they distort the inner voice of reason, turning it into a tool controlled by their will. The moment a person openly declares, "This is the individual who shaped my way of thinking," they become a predictable subject for external control. Observers begin to scrutinize every move, expecting them to merely reflect the actions and decisions of others. And if they suddenly dare to deviate from the expected path, a barrage of criticism will fall upon them, accompanied by comparisons to the very person they once extolled. "But your idol would never have acted this way," they slyly remark, attempting to bring them back into familiar bounds. Suddenly, a person's individuality finds itself bound by invisible chains, tied to the shadow of another. This is how influence turns into a veritable prison, if its source is not kept secret. However, when that door remains firmly locked, when no one knows who whispers inspiring words into their ear, the person transforms into an enigma that no one can solve. They move forward in silence, develop in directions completely unexpected by others, and evolve without anyone's permission or approval. They become something undefinable, unclassifiable, and people, as is well known, fear what they cannot define or understand. Sources of inspiration should serve to form a personality, not to brand it. A person is not obliged to explain to anyone who exactly catalyzed their ascent. The names they study, the minds they follow, these are sacred, intimate blueprints that give them special power and even danger. The moment they utter these names aloud, they essentially hand over their map to others. And once others see their map, they will immediately know where they are going. Worse still, they will begin to place obstacles in their path even before they reach their goal. Let a person's actions speak for themselves, without unnecessary words. Let their victories merely hint at some influence, but never openly confirm it. He who reveals his sources also reveals his plan. And he who keeps this information secret becomes his own unshakable force. The great Machiavelli once stated, "A wise man should always follow the paths trodden by great men, and imitate those who have been supreme." And he was, undoubtedly, correct in his assertion. However, He never advocated for disseminating information about the specific paths one follows. It is at this point that most people make a fatal mistake. They mistakenly confuse influence with their own identity. And when their idols fall, they too fall with them. A person possesses the unique ability to draw knowledge and experience from everywhere, while maintaining the complete independence of their beliefs and methods. True power lies in this unbiased position. This influence, like an invisible current, is absorbed in silence and applied without loud declarations of its source. Thus, if ever asked, they are not obligated to answer. They become a true creator, an original source. However, one must acknowledge a bitter truth. The vast majority of people rarely truly learn. Once others can identify the sources of their inspiration, they may try to copy their strength. But if they cannot trace their roots, they will never be able to replicate their tree. They observe the fruits of their labor, sense the shadow of their greatness, but remain completely unaware of the depth of their roots. And it is this type of personality that instills fear in them. This is a person whose mind was forged in silence and darkness, sharpened by voices that will forever remain unheard by others. The third rule states, never reveal your daily habits. A person's daily habits serve as windows into their inner world and way of thinking. The moment someone notices a certain pattern in them, they immediately begin to set traps. Many tend to consider routine a completely harmless trait, a sign of high discipline, irrefutable proof of focus. However, discipline, when it becomes public knowledge, transforms into a detailed roadmap. And roadmaps, as is known, are created to be followed, intercepted, or even hijacked. The more transparent and predictable one's life structure becomes, the easier it is for ill-wishers to manipulate them. If a person publicly states that they go for a run every morning at 6 o'clock a.m., their opponents now know exactly where they will be, and when their mind is mentally tied to this routine. If they always check their phone late at night, opponents will wait for them to be tired to send messages capable of provoking, distracting, or manipulating them. The very structure they meticulously built for their own reinforcement inadvertently turns into a script that others can use against them. This is no longer efficiency, it is vulnerability, skillfully disguised as consistency. One simple truth must be recognized. Predictability is a fundamental weakness, especially in a world where attention acts as currency, and distraction is a powerful weapon. When people are aware of one's life rhythm, they will synchronize with it not for support, but with the intent to sabotage. They will call when one is most accessible. They will argue when one is most fatigued. They will appear when one's guard is down. And this happens not because they are unusually clever, but because one has provided them with the key to their actions. There's a reason shadows exist. It's the concept of movement devoid of any predictable pattern, activity that leaves no clear traces. A person's habits should remain strictly their private affair, hidden from prying eyes. Their schedule should be absolutely unpredictable, so no one can anticipate it. They can maintain consistency in their actions and results while remaining completely unobservable to others. Today, they might rise with the first rays of the sun, and tomorrow allow themselves a long sleep. Their workouts, if any, take place in deep silence, without witnesses or publicity. They respond to questions or take important actions at moments when it is completely unexpected. Their movements should resemble stasis. They are present, but their next step is unclear. They are always active, but their actions remain completely unreadable to others. Let others try in vain to trace their path and fail in their attempts. Let their temporary disappearance seem like a carefully planned maneuver. Let their silence be perceived as a manifestation of deep strategy. True power stems from the inability of opponents or competitors to find a person in the same position twice. If others cannot anticipate one's actions, they lose the ability to adequately prepare for their appearance or moves. They begin to fall into guesswork, wasting precious time on fruitless contemplation. Their calculations prove to be mistaken, and every one of their delusions, every one of their missteps, becomes an undeniable advantage that this person immediately uses to their benefit. The great Machiavelli once uttered a wise phrase: "A wise man does at once what a fool does later." Ultimately, the unwise person clings to their established habits and routine, guided only by a desire for comfort and avoiding any change. The wise person, on the contrary, possesses the insight to adapt and alter their approaches, even before a familiar rut turns into an insurmountable cage. For the very moment others begin to clearly discern their repetitive behavioral patterns, they cease to perceive them as a living, thinking individual. Instead, they see only a mechanism, a predictable system. And any mechanism, no matter how complex, is always susceptible to being hacked and manipulated. One must erase all tracks, disrupt any predictable rhythm. Today they might have lunch exactly at 6 p.m., and tomorrow skip a meal altogether. Their appearance should be sudden, without the slightest warning, as should their departure. Let them turn time itself into their powerful weapon. Let their inconsistency become a source of deep frustration for those who try to understand them. And when they attempt to unravel their essence, let it become clear to them that their efforts are like chasing elusive smoke, utterly meaningless. For the moment, no one can track their daily rhythm, their actions and movements. They transcend a merely strategic level. They transform into something far more significant, a dangerous, unreadable, and virtually untouchable force, acting with absolutely no recognizable pattern. And in the complex, sometimes ruthless game for power, it is such a person who instills the greatest fear, one who never makes the same move twice, always remaining unpredictable. Number 4. Never reveal that you have forgiven. It is often heard that people advocate for forgiveness ennobling the soul, and the ability to let go of resentment making a person stronger. However, the real world is not governed solely by lofty ideals of nobility. It operates on entirely different principles of pressure, influence, and perception. And as soon as anyone learns that a person has forgiven, they immediately gain command of all three of these powerful levers of influence. Just imagine this situation. The moment an individual lets it be known that they have let a certain transgression go unpunished, be it outright lies, treacherous betrayal, or public humiliation, the offenders scrutinize this reaction. They don't just notice it, they meticulously record it in their memory, and not to appreciate nobility or mercy. Their true goal is to determine how far they will be allowed to go next time. If the person did not confront them, did not make demands, they conclude they lack character. If they made no attempt to retaliate, they begin to assume there will be no retribution in the future. Thus, displayed forgiveness paradoxically turns into dangerous ammunition, not for the one who grants it, but for those who receive it. And each time an individual demonstrates their tolerance, they are essentially just marking the clear boundaries of their own vulnerability. However, silence holds an entirely different power. It is truly deadly. When a person does not rush to reveal that they have already let the situation go, that the incident is over for them, the offenders remain in a state of deep bewilderment. Questions swirl in their minds. Did they really forgive me? Or are they just biding their time? This persistent doubt, this deliberately created uncertainty, proves to be far more terrifying than openly expressed anger. The reason is simple. The person has not given them the closure they subconsciously crave. They have left a deep wound open, not allowing it to heal. And now, every subsequent move, every decision they make, is clouded by constant apprehension about what they believe the person might do next. Forgiveness, if it happens at all, must remain a deeply personal matter. This isn't born of bitterness or resentment, but from the understanding that true strength doesn't lie in providing comfort to those who have wronged you. On the contrary, it manifests in the ability to keep them constantly on edge, forcing them to be exceedingly cautious. An individual is under no obligation to offer them emotional clarity or to signal that everything is all right. There's no need to prove complete healing from the inflicted trauma. Healing doesn't mean openness or baring one's soul. It primarily means control, complete and unquestioning. And control, in turn, implies never revealing the true state of your inner battlefield. Let them remain in their delusion, believing you've moved on. Let them laugh, thinking you've simply forgotten what happened. Meanwhile, while your detractors are steeped in their illusions, you have already altered your approach to the situation, meticulously adjusting the distance in your relationships. You now observe them from an entirely different angle, from a new, strategic perspective. After all, an opponent who mistakenly believes themselves to be completely safe is much easier to neutralize. This isn't because they have suddenly become weak, but because they inevitably lose their vigilance, becoming careless and predictable. The great thinker Machiavelli once aptly noted, "Injuries ought to be inflicted all at once, so that their bitterness may be less acutely felt, being tasted but once." Forgiveness in this world, paradoxically, becomes a kind of mirrored reflection of such a wound. However, if one displays their forgiveness too early, if they utter it aloud, publicly announcing it, they inevitably soften the memory of the offense. And when past grievances lose their initial sting, when their painfulness fades from consciousness, they, unfortunately, tend to repeat themselves. Let those around you remain in this delicate tension, constantly wondering, have they moved past the situation, or are they merely biding their time? It is in this manner that one attains the status of being untouchable. They do not allow themselves overt emotional reactions. They do not engage in lengthy explanations of their actions. They merely demonstrate an ability to adapt. And when the most opportune moment arrives, they act. Their actions are not dictated by a thirst for vengeance, but are executed with extreme precision. They are not an outpouring of emotion but possess a surgical exactness. Internally, they forgive. Externally, they strategize. Never should these two aspects be conflated, for as soon as others grasp the threshold of your tolerance for betrayal, they will inevitably begin to test your boundaries. However, if this threshold remains completely hidden, no one will dare approach it. Uncertainty, in essence, is an instrument of control. Silence represents the most powerful pressure. And a person who forgives without uttering it aloud transforms into an unpredictable storm that they cannot foresee. They become the retribution they never expect. The fifth rule states, never reveal what you are still healing from. Pain is an inherent part of the human experience. We all carry it within us. For some, it originates in childhood. For others, from betrayal. For some, it stems from battles that no one else can ever understand. However, in a world driven by control, manipulation, and undeclared war, pain is not merely physical or emotional suffering. It is valuable information. And the moment one reveals where this pain resides within them, they voluntarily hand over the key to their inner world to others. Just say that you are still experiencing the aftermath of feeling abandoned, and someone will immediately begin to test your fear of loneliness. Simply open up about trust issues, and someone will pledge loyalty, only to break it later and watch you fall apart. They don't do this because they are driven by evil. They do it because human nature is inherently opportunistic. When people sense weakness, they either try to avoid it or unhesitatingly exploit it for their own ends. And if they are unable to perceive another's wounds, they don't know how to behave around that person. Such confusion preserves your power. You should never allow them to track your pain. Once they know what caused your suffering, they will begin to observe you intently, like an object of study, testing your reactions, probing for triggers, assessing which words strike a blow, and which silence shakes you from within. What once constituted a person's private history can become a cunning strategy for others. Their vulnerabilities, once sacred, risk transforming into a script for opponents to follow. And thus, the individual themselves becomes readable, predictable, stripped of invisibility, and therefore vulnerable. However, if those around are unaware of the causes of their suffering, if they are unable to discern the hidden cracks in their soul, they are compelled to assume their absence. This is not a denial of reality. Rather, it is conscious protection. A person does not reject their own past. They merely cease to reveal it to those who have not earned such trust and such revelation. No one is obligated to hand over a detailed roadmap of their past trials to anyone, even if the request seems to come with the most sincere and gentle eyes. For not everyone is driven by a desire to understand. Some merely seek to gain an advantage, to use another's pain for their own benefit. Niccolò Machiavelli once wisely observed, "He who builds on the people, builds on mud." This profound thought also applies to the process of healing when it is based on the sympathy, approval, or external perception of others. To rely on others' emotions and opinions in such an intimate matter is to build a foundation on shifting, unreliable ground. The individual does not require their understanding. They have no need for outsiders to know all the intricacies of their journey. They do not need their applause for having endured hellish trials. They need only one, yet extremely important thing: silence. The very silence that protects them during recovery, safeguarding them as they become more perceptive, stronger, and more composed. This mysterious stillness forces adversaries to wonder and fear what remains invisible to their eyes, what is beyond their control and analysis. For healing is a sacred process. It is not a public spectacle, not a casual conversation, but a true war. A quiet, deeply personal war. And when one emerges victorious, they do not make grand announcements. They return to the world as if they were never wounded, as if scars never left a trace on their soul. They move with the imperturbable confidence of one who forged themselves in utter darkness, who passed through the purifying fire of trials and emerged tempered. Let the world meet them when they are whole and composed. Let those around them wonder what made them so calm, so balanced, so unshakable in their inner strength. Never surrender your pain to others, expecting protection or understanding from them. It must be concealed. One should heal in complete silence, and then return to the world as a completely new person, one whom no one expected to see, for initially, they could not discern the hidden cracks. The world in which modern humans reside seems to thrive on a continuous hum and noise. Many people constantly speak, actively publish their thoughts, and share their innermost feelings, genuinely believing that public visibility equates to true power and influence. However, they are unaware of one crucial circumstance. The more details they reveal about themselves, the easier it becomes to break them. Every candid status update, every emotionally charged online post, is nothing more than an unwitting disclosure of the blueprint for their own destruction, a demonstration of their vulnerabilities. And while these people relentlessly seek external validation, another individual chooses an entirely different weapon: profound silence. Such a person does not utter words to attract attention. They prefer to move unnoticed, remaining in the shadows, for it is there, away from prying eyes, that true power lies. Their unreadability is not due to being lost or lacking purpose. On the contrary, they remain unreadable because they are in complete control of every situation and their position within it. Every unanswered question concerning such an individual transforms into an unassailable wall that others are unable to breach. They are deprived of the ability to predict their actions, cannot prepare for their moves in advance, and, most importantly, are unable to control what remains beyond their comprehension. The great Machiavelli perfectly understood this truth. He knew that skillful strategy lies not in openly displaying one's power, but in the ability to keep people constantly guessing where that power truly resides. This is precisely the kind of person one becomes when choosing this path now. They are like a phantom, invisibly present in the room, or a raging storm hidden behind calm, unperturbed eyes. Others will see their smile, and will never be able to decipher its true meaning. They will hear their silence and feel an indefinable pressure. They will try in vain to understand them, but will invariably fail. And it is this very inability to understand that is their greatest strength. So, if this revelation stirs deep within your soul, if it reminds you of who you truly are and what you are capable of, then the moment has come to change your approach to action. It is time to act differently, like an elusive shadow, like an invisible yet palpable force that no one has ever truly seen. And most importantly, you should keep your mouth shut, and your mind razor sharp. From now on, you do not chase fleeting influence. You yourself become a force that moves unnoticed, remaining out of sight. The essence of this great game is not to achieve fame. It is to attain complete untouchability. And, by following this path, you become truly unstoppable.